Thank you, Deidre. So I'm going to take the opportunity to call this meeting to order. Thank you for coming to the Youth Subcommittee of the Community Task Force. Today we are graced by the presence of Dr. Hoadley and Dr. Marshausen, superintendents of both Dublin City Schools and Hilliard City Schools. I thought we'd take a moment to go around the horn and introduce ourselves since we don't all know each other on the call. So Jamil, if you'd like to start us off in introducing yourself.
Hello, I'm Jamil Robinson. I'm a senior at Dublin Kaufman. Probably referred to as Mrs. Robinson.
Gotcha. Hi, everyone.
Well, I don't mind going next. I'm Kirby Dirth. I'm an intern in the Office of the City Manager, and I serve as a staff liaison for this subcommittee as well as the Communications and Education Subcommittee.
Hey everyone, Todd Hoadley, Superintendent, Dublin City Schools. Great to see everyone, and Mrs. Robinson, great to see you as well.
Good afternoon, John Marshausen, Superintendent of Hilliard City Schools. And Will, thanks for the invite.
No problem. I'm Will Kanapke. I'm a junior at Hilliard Davidson and a resident of Ballinger.
I'm Deidre Wolf. I'm the executive assistant to Dana McDaniel, our city manager.
I'm Sammy, and I'm a senior at Dublin Jerome.
And I'm Audrey Bannister. I'm a senior at Scioto.
Well, great. Now that we're all acquainted and best friends, we can take some time to just ask questions of the superintendents. I'm not sure, Dr. Hoadley had mentioned he had a hard stop at 6:30 that he needed to be off. If there's anything you'd like to share, Dr. Hoadley, before everybody starts in with their questions.
Yeah, great to see everyone. Sorry, I've got another meeting. We have our key communicators tonight at 6:30, but I know we've got Audrey and Jamil. You guys have been on my superintendent committee as students for the last 4 years, so great to see you too. Sammy, I don't know you as well, but senior at Jerome, and Will, we've got to know each other just through these meetings here. But I really want to just say thank you and applaud all four of you for being great student leaders. And really, these are unprecedented times. And I really appreciate you stepping up, because ultimately change is going to come through our youth, long-term change. And I so much appreciate, again, your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Hoadley. Now, does anybody have any questions of the superintendents?
I had one regarding, I know you guys related or closely tied to Board of Education. And so when we were talking last meeting, we were discussing how we could better diversity discussion as when you're younger, like a youth, and maybe using the guidance counselors, how they'll talk about bullying and tailor it towards the age group so it's age appropriate. And I was wondering if there's a way you guys could talk to the Board of Education and try to incorporate diversity discussion throughout elementary school and middle school, so that when it's when we get to higher grades in middle school or in high school, it's more easy to talk about and not as awkward, and it reduces the chances of maybe racial abuse or certain things happening in high school and middle school, because it's been talked about and people know how to deal with it. So I was wondering if you guys maybe could find a way to incorporate that with the Board of Education.
Todd, I'll let you go first since you got to jump.
Okay. Well, Jamil, first off, thanks for that question. And I think all of you are aware, but we're in the process right now of hiring actually a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think what you've brought up is so important, because all of you came from probably different elementaries in Dublin. You know that our elementaries have some unique needs. They have some unique populations of students here. And so it has to start at the elementary. I really appreciate our Board of Education allowing us to have a school counselor in each of our buildings there, because they do a lot of in the classroom type of discussions, not necessarily right now about race, but that's something we're going to have to move into, but especially ramping it up at the middle school level, because if we wait to high school, to your point, it's really too late. A lot of things have almost, the die has been cast. And so bringing it down while children are forming kind of their identities and their opinions and thoughts around others, that elementary, middle school age is just absolutely crucial for that.
I also think a key component we have to do is we have to prepare our teachers better how to have these conversations as they come up in our classrooms. For far too long, we have in school kind of tried to avoid the controversial conversations around race in the classrooms. And there's a certain level of discomfort we have to become comfortable with as we, as educators, lead these conversations. And not everybody's ready for this. And that's going to have to be okay. But as we look at how do we provide teachers training when someone says a comment that isn't appropriate, we can't pretend like we didn't hear it. We can't pretend like this is a conversation that can't happen in science class or English class, that can only happen in US history. So we have to prepare our teachers for something they've never been trained for. So we've got to train them and get them ready, because it's the curriculum, it's the books, it's what we do, but it's also how we behave. And I think that's more important as we embrace an anti-racist approach. And it can't be we don't have racist things in our curriculum anymore. We have to be anti-racism. And that's a different approach that we haven't taken before. And it's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen in the school year. It's going to happen, as Dr. Hogan said, we need your generation to be better than ours. So how do we prepare you to be the next generation of leaders? And that is allowing us to have some of these tough conversations.
If I could add one more, and this is more unique to Dublin, and this is definitely specific to our high school, but doubling back, we have, different needs, different populations in each of our buildings. I think we have to make sure that we're willing to customize our solutions and not try to create a top-down, one-size-fits-all. So empowering students, empowering teachers, empowering principals, it doesn't have to look the same as Kaufman, as it does at Scioto, as it does in Jerome. It could look similar, but it doesn't have to look identical. And then going back to your elementary comment, we have 14 elementaries, and they look vastly different. If we just look at it from an economic lens, if nothing more, and those, again, from the equity and inclusion standpoint, the solutions need to be similar, but not necessarily identical. And there may be some Dublin buildings that are more similar to some Hilliard school buildings. And so just like we partnered on emotional health, maybe there's some of this that we can partner Dublin and Hilliard, and also bring in Worthington and Columbus, because this is not just specific to the Dublin community. This is part of our unfortunate nationwide fabric.
As you said earlier, that I think the middle school, I do think the middle school component is going to be key, because starting in the high school is great, and having this conversation in the high school is great, but I know a lot of people, we have had to try to have some conversations, but they're usually not super productive, and they usually don't get the participation that we need for them to actually go somewhere or to change the minds of people. So in my opinion, I don't know if I do think we really need to focus on the middle schools and elementary schools more so than the high schools at this point. I think in 4 or 5 years down the road, when those kids that got the training and got the talks in the middle school and elementary school in high school, then I think they'll be more open to it. But at this moment, I don't know how effective the initiatives we're taking in the high school actually are.
I think what we're doing at our high school, Will, and you've experienced some of the pushback we've gotten in the last 2 weeks at Davidson. We've gotten some unfortunate media coverage. We have some students who are very active. And as adults, we need to make sure that we support those students who are active, but also follow. Right now in Hilliard, for those of you who are unaware, our city council is considering an LGBTQ plus initiative. And we had some students who made a video, and that video was sent as a lesson. And we can't promote when you lobby outside groups. And here's the thing I would tell all of our students: if that video was made for us in school, we could have shown it differently, because once you show things in school, it's your own school culture. When you start lobbying an external political subdivision, now you're a lobbying group. So we have to work with our students. And Will, I think you're right. When it comes to the education, we got to start younger. When it comes to the activism, we have to make sure that we're all supporting our kids, because you guys at 17, 18 years old, you're getting involved. And in Hilliard, our city council went to the students and asked them to get involved. So we've got to make sure we're all in the right place when it comes to, if we want to be supportive, we have to do it right. Because when we don't do it right, we draw fire, which hurts what we're trying to do. So we want to be able to support our students. We want to encourage them to be active. It's your world. It's your future. So how do we get you to have that voice, but also make sure that we're following all the rules and policies and procedures so we don't hurt what everybody's trying to do?
Hi, Dr. Marsh. How do you pronounce it?
Marshhausen.
Marshhausen.
Yeah, everybody here just calls me Dr. John, though, because nobody can figure it out.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I'm wondering, I hadn't heard any of what was happening with the group of kids and the publicity with the Hilliard School District, but I'm wondering, so I'm a little in the dark on that, but I'm wondering, is there a way, maybe as you're saying, that at the high school level, some kids are much more vocal, much more active? Is there a way to give like small wins, like to make maybe students or people who are fighting against status quo feel like they're achieving small wins along the way, as opposed to achieving anything? Like, maybe is that the bridge to it's almost like matriculating through school. It's like if you never took a test, you'd start to say, well, I don't need to study. You have to be almost like these little milestones or markers along the way, make you feel like you're making some progress, that make you feel like you're winning, you're achieving, you're growing or learning or something to that effect. So, and I know, because this is really tough. So it's like, how do we carve out the small wins that help to help the even larger community to accept things? Because we tend to accept, change is just hard, period. We just tend to accept things in bite-sized pieces more, like as things change a little bit, then we can change more. Yeah. Because you're right, that negative publicity would just tend to totally skew everything in the opposite direction of making any forward progress, and we don't want that. So
yeah, I don't mind the negative. When we're fighting for what's right and we're doing it right, then we can be steadfast. We made a mistake when the link was sent as it's like a lesson and asking kids to lobby. Our teachers can't ask students to lobby another political subdivision. We have student groups. We have advisors to these groups. We have our Gay Straight Alliance, which has been very active. We now have our BIPOC populations that are active, and they have advisors, and we hired a director of equity and diversity. Some of the hardest things I've ever sat through as a superintendent were the student conversations after the tragedy with George Floyd in Minneapolis. When we asked our Black students, what's your experience like in Hilliard? And it was heart-wrenching, it was embarrassing, and I was shocked. And having those students now be able to work with our teacher organizations, and we have a BIPOC teacher organization who's meeting with our students, with our diversity coordinator. Our board is very supportive. We're not doing it right yet. We still have a long, long way to go. But I think we're finally at least going in the right direction. And I wish it didn't have to go slow. I wish it could go fast. But what we can't let is the momentum stop. And I think too often in our country's history, we've gone through periods where there was an event that sparked an uprising, that sparked change, and then people just let it kind of back off and we went back to the status quo. That's what we can't permit to happen. That's why I think we have to make sure this stays a front and burner issue for all of us as we look forward. And it's great that we have partnerships now with cities. Our city council is considering that legislation on March 8th. I believe this is a subcommittee of Dublin City Council. We have to continue this movement with alignment and with fidelity. And it's probably not going to go as fast as we want it to go, but it's got to keep moving. And I think that's where it's important.
Audrey or Sammy, what are your thoughts at Scioto and Jerome?
Well, something that we discussed like during the last meeting is I talked about our global cafe that we have at Scioto, and Jamil mentioned that there's something similar at Kaufman. And I mentioned like how I feel like that event brings everyone together, and it's like a fun celebration of culture, and it's an engaging way to learn about other people and their heritage. So we mentioned like maybe trying to have something like that on a larger scale, like bridging between schools or maybe just for the community in general. And I realized like at the moment it's not possible to do it in person, like something super big. But we discussed like the possibilities of doing something virtual like that. And that'll help like educate other people, and that could be open for like any age either, I think.
At Jerome, we don't have like a global cafe, but we have like multicultural day, which is kind of similar because like different people bring in like food from their culture and like activities, and that's like during lunch. But I think what you said, Audrey, about like having a school like between different schools would be a really good idea.
Can I ask the kids? Like having something like that is like pretty phenomenal. It's great. Just tasting foods from different cultures, seeing people's clothing, things like that. How much do you like activities like that help with, when you think about like what was written about in Dear Dublin or Dear Hilliard, do having not that we should have having activities like that, we should even maybe more have activities like that, but what role do you feel like activities like that play in helping to reduce some of those kinds of occurrences that are happening, or how can we do more of that or something to really, get into the hearts of people? for any of the kids?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason that kids can be rude about those things, it's just because of ignorance, and they just don't know the importance of someone's culture, or they don't know the history of it, which is why events like that are important, because when you learn that history, you can learn the importance of it, what that means to someone else. It helps you be more empathetic to other people. I feel like that empathy is a huge part of understanding and accepting other people. And I know that's just a part of it, that won't be the whole solution, but something like that could help.
Yeah, I happened to see a little video that I think it's from the Columbus School District, and it's like about a minute and a half long, and it's on self-awareness. But the angle of the self-awareness video, so it's almost like a public service and that thing that the kids maybe put together, or it looks very professional, but maybe like the kids in like a video class, the video classes that the high schools offer, could do like little public service announcements. And so the self-awareness video talks about, it relates it to equity, and it talks about how the more, because I just remember some of the stories in the Dear Dublin and the Dear Hilliard about when people would experience microaggressions or things like that. They didn't, it's almost like you don't even have your own self-awareness to know how to respond. And so you just kind of take it in and go silent. And so this self-awareness public service announcement talked about how equity, the issue of equity means that you feel like you belong, like you feel like you have worth. And so just kind of elevating it that way. And so it's kind of your own, but then it also equally applies to any human being, you know. And so I thought, when I saw that video, I thought this could be something that's really, that could almost be like a campaign that could be maybe even fun, or like there could be like a competition between the 3 high schools to come up with like the best 1 minute or 90-second video that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have like a competition, and have like all the kids vote on which one wins, and have it like travel from school to school, like a little trophy or whatever. I don't know, just like some ways to make it fun and engaging, almost like how the volleyball competition, I mean, not the volleyball, the dodgeball competition, like gets all the schools involved, and there's like this whole thing where it feels like a whole community thing, but it's also competitive, but it's also fun competitive. And so a way of reaching, especially for high school kids, reaching them fun, creative, competitive, like healthy competitive. And I think you guys talked about that competitiveness even last year, like maybe even like Hoffman last week, Davidson versus Hoffman, and how there's like this competitiveness whenever it's a rivalry. But I just thought that was like an excellent public service announcement video that they did that was really about self-awareness, but specifically tied to the issue of equity and what that meant. So
I like that idea, especially with our video broadcasting programs at all 3 of our high schools, and they're actually going to merge next year at the Emerald campus. That would be a nice theme, maybe a first-year kickoff, just like the Dublin Business Academy has a theme of a T-shirt shop. You know, maybe the communications video broadcasting may have a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens in its communication focus for year 1.
So I just want to speak about the Dear Dublin and the Dear Hilliard pages because, in truth, I wasn't aware about them until probably November. I had no idea that they existed, and I think that's an issue in its own right. And I don't know how well the stories are being broadcasted to everyone. Um, I think that was a good start, but I'm just wondering if we're gonna start and try and educate within the schools, and we have a captive audience, and we have the entire student body, or even just the high school student body, why are we not sharing those stories? Because I think those stories would be more impactful than, you know, some really open-ended, broad discussion about diversity that teachers don't really know how to lead. Because that's the tough topic to lead, you know, for a teacher that's trained in chemistry. So I'm just wondering, why aren't we using those stories that have already been put out there and just telling the high school students about them? Because personally, I think that'd be more impactful.
I think they're still there, Will. The pages and the stories are still they're still live, and you can still go see them. I would be really hesitant to put those students up in front of other students to share their stories. I know that in small groups, there was a lot of honest sharing about what our students' journey was like in Hilliard. And I think you're right. Our students need to hear from their peers, students, and I don't know if this is politically correct, but I'll say it anyway. Students who look like you need to hear how their classmates feel in our school district so that they understand and that we can change our behavior, because that's what's going to need to happen. Our teachers need to hear how our Black and brown students feel before they're going to change their behavior. And those are real changes that have to happen, and those are tough conversations. I would guess, well, if you ask your teachers have read the Dear Hilliard Schools Instagram posts. So that was those are things that are hard to read, and that I'm sure Todd and I both lose sleep over. And that's one of the things that motivates us to have to lead this change. But yeah, we have to find a way to understand our classmates, our Hilliard family feels this way. The kids in any school feel this way, and you can't learn, you can't feel welcome, you can't, we talk a lot about sense of belonging. In order to improve the sense of belonging, be an equity lens and a diversity lens in everything that we do.
And I 100% agree with that. And I understand the page is still up. I fear it's not, even if it's still up, I don't feel like it's being promoted the way it needs to be, in my, from what I can see.
It's keeping that voice going and finding safe places for students to share what they're experiencing.
I'll share on that, and then I'm going to have to jump off the call in just a few minutes. But I think one of the powerful things as far as the Dear Dublin, and I've not read the Dear Hilliard, is that it created a conversation among the adults that work within our school system. And some of the posts directly talked about behaviors by school employees that are truly not meant to be racist nor anything more than caring. And it was things like talking to students about their hair or things of that nature. And I think that was something that really opened eyes to adults about the blind spots that we have, the ignorance that we have, and just how out of balance the racial makeup of our faculty and staff and administration is in comparison to our student body, and the blind spots that create. Conversations have not occurred because of that one-sidedness. And so I think there has been some, and there will be some long-term good come from those posts, because it's started a conversation among adults about how can we do better for our students, because that's our motivation all the time as educators. How do we do right, and how do we continuously improve providing great services and experiences for our students? So guys, I appreciate it. I'm gonna have to jump off. I so much appreciate your leadership, so much appreciate this conversation. I know for my own student leaders, we'll get together in the next couple of weeks, I anticipate, and talk about this even more deeply. And I know a lot of you are seniors, so we have to figure out heading into next year, how do we pass the baton so that we don't lose your leadership and so that we can continue this important discussion at all of our high schools and across all of our school districts. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right, guys, it's just me. So do you have anything else that I can help with? Well, I could always stop by Davidson.
Well, Dr. Marshausen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just want to do a quick head count and see, did anybody have any other questions before we move along? Is there any burning desire to ask Dr. Marshausen anything?
I was just, it just kind of builds on what Will was saying. And it may not happen, but had there ever been a thought of having almost like a, I don't know if when we were younger, we used to have school assemblies and like the whole school was in the room and the principal but maybe it's by grade level, but almost like a, and it could be one directional primarily if, just to kind of contain it, but where it's a debriefing of, so to Will's point that he didn't even know that the Dear Hilliard existed. Like there's a community, of course, of the people who were sharing on it that know about it, but there's a huge doesn't know about it. And maybe just, I don't know. I mean, it's a balance because to your point, some of the things that are shared, but eventually kids find things anyway. So just to maybe present it in a way that just says we as administrators and as teachers care, we now know about this. We as a generation even recognize that there are things we didn't even know, and each generation knows more, you know more, you know better, you do better. But maybe something like that where it was kind of like debriefed or put into a context or something like that. You may never want to do that, but has that been discussed?
Right now, unfortunately, we're trying to get our kids into school, and getting them all in the auditorium for an assembly would be, the crazy part about all of this is the tragedy in May was 3 months into the pandemic. And, for us, and I think the board meets tomorrow night, and it looks like you guys are going to be on the same path as us. The first time we'll be able to have all our kids in the same classes will be on Monday, the 15th. So yes, I do think that there need to be opportunities for our student leaders to engage their peers. And I think we're all Zoomed, WebExed out. I know our subgroups have been meeting. We have multiple groups at the school district level doing exactly what Dublin City Council is doing with you folks, and this is one of the subcommittees. We actually have subcommittees going through our elementary book collections and our high school reading assignments, and we're doing a curriculum audit and a policy audit and a handbook audit, and we've got students on all of these committees, and I can't wait till they can be in the same room together, because as we come out of the craziness of this pandemic, it allows us to then build connections and relationships that I can't wait till I'm not looking at people on screens and I'm looking at them face to face. So that's going to happen. It's multiple situations right now, all kind of converging at the same time. Well, thank you all for what you're doing. Will, thank you for jumping into the Dublin side of things from Davidson and living in Ballantrae. And I don't think people realize across the state how whenever anyone talks about what's happening on this side of the city, it's Dublin and Hilliard. It's Dublin and Hilliard. And we see ourselves sometimes as competitors. but as neighbors, we're inextricably linked together. So when one of us does well, the other one does well. So, and we stole your assistant city manager, so we've got Michelle now. There are lots of connections there. So thank you for what you're doing, and you guys are the future. We'll keep working to make a brighter future for all of you. Thank you.
I still haven't gotten over the fact that you stole Michelle from us. Michelle's a great mentor and a good friend. If the subcommittee doesn't mind, I'd like to ask a question of Dr. Marshausen before he takes off. Do you guys mind? Okay, great. So it's kind of a two-parter. First of which, you had mentioned that you had a diversity and inclusion officer or a manager of diversity and inclusion, and you kind of referenced some of the things that you as an organization, some of the policies you're pushing forward. What do you see as some of your greatest opportunities or industry best practices that local school districts can implement to try to tackle some of the racism problems or just diversity and inclusion efforts in local schools?
Well, I'm not sure we have all the answers, but in July, our board passed an anti-racism resolution, and they required the school district to hire a director of equity and diversity. And it's actually a Dublin mom, Samantha Chapman, who was a principal in our district. Her kids go to Scioto. Samantha's our cabinet level officer, director of equity and diversity. We also have 2 student level diversity coordinators, Janet Monserdur and Sabine Canty. So we have 3 administrators, 1 cabinet level, 2 who focus with students on equity. There's a 3-year plan that has required us, the board directed me as superintendent, a curriculum audit, a policy audit, and a 3-year plan for where we're going to go with measurable goals and objectives. And the board laid out that there is systemic racism in the Hilliard City schools. We will root out systemic racism. And there are a lot of folks in our community who don't think there is systemic racism. But when the board lays that out, then I'm not the one saying, people are like, how do you know there's systemic racism? Well, the board said there is. So because our Board of Education took that stance, and the board committed to being an anti-racism district, it eliminates me from having to debate whether it's an issue. We've defined that it's an issue, so we have to move forward on this. There's also, and I know that Dublin, I think it's on an upcoming agenda, is hiring a diversity coordinator. There is a work group of Central Ohio diversity coordinators. And Hilliard has a diversity coordinator, as does Columbus, as does Westerville, and their superintendents. So Samantha and I are on a monthly call with folks from Ohio State, from the Kirwan Institute. We don't have the resources to do this work alone, but we've got the largest land grant university in the country in our backyard. And the Department of Education and Human Ecology, this is a focus for them. So we have the resources from Kirwan. We're able to do the equity audit for our staff, partnering with Ohio State. We're able to get PD partnering with Ohio State. I think our teachers are one of the biggest hurdles, not because they're racist, but because they don't understand that their behavior in many ways perpetuates the systemic racism. We have to look at how do we define success? Because in the past, success has been defined by everyone assimilating to one definition of what a successful student is. And we have to look at culturally, what are the cultural definitions of successful students, and not only accept, but celebrate those as a district and as a community. So that has to be part of that audit as we look at, it's not about everybody having the same successful definition as a white suburban kid who's going to go to a 4-year institution, who's going to get a 4-year degree and then go work in the same field that their mom and dad work in. Redefining success is important. And so we got a lot of work to do around all of those things. And it can't be up to me to do it. It's got to be, it's an us, it's not a me. But having people leading that work and leading those conversations is critical. So, oof, that's some of the stuff that we're doing. And as I said, Will probably doesn't know we're doing it, so we're not doing it all very well yet. But our board was intentional, and we worked with Ohio State, a 3-year plan to start to get this work going in the right direction is I think where we landed in what I've been directed to do by our school board.
I think those are some really good points, and I hope that those of us from the Dublin City School District who meet with Dr. Hoadley will be able to report back to him, because it sounds like he's got some work ahead of him to catch up to what Hilliard is doing in the strategic planning aspect. This subcommittee is part of the community task force at large. Council has tasked them with putting together a strategic plan for the community at large, at which the city would organize and orchestrate. Where do you see some of the opportunities for local school districts to partner with municipalities to tackle this problem outside of the schools?
Well, I think so Dublin's Dublin. So you have the Irish Festival. Are there opportunities to have community-wide events that celebrate the diversity in our communities? There's now Bridge Park, and there's a vibrant downtown area. Are there opportunities for cities and students to celebrate what makes our communities diverse? The more diverse our communities, the stronger we're going to prepare our students for success in a multicultural global world. And that's what we're preparing these kids to do. It's a flat global world. We could have people from all over the world on this WebEx. So how do we get the adults and the students to join in these celebrations, to redefine success, and to look at what makes us all us? There are lots of opportunities for us to do this. And part of it is coming out of COVID. Some of the things we want to do, we've never done before. Like we're talking about summer arts programs, summer theater programs. How do we celebrate what our kids have done and can do with a community lens out there? If I look at the two communities right now, it's kind of interesting because our school board is ahead of the work in some of our school boards work, but your city council is ahead of the work in some of the community work. So if we can get our two communities working together, we're all going to benefit because we all have places that we need to catch up and work to do.
Those are some great points, and I really appreciate your wisdom in regards to those efforts.
I'm only learning from our people. It's, you got to listen, and you got to listen to our students and their adults and their parents about what their experiences are and where we need to get better. And you got to be willing to say, you know what, we're not there. A lot of the times as districts and as cities, we like to look at the things we do great and not acknowledge the things that we don't do well. And we have to be open and transparent to say, you know what, we're not doing this all well, and commit to listen so we can get better. Because I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to listen to smart people who do.
Well, that's great. And barring any further questions from any of the subcommittee members, I just wanted to thank you on behalf of everybody for coming and talking to us today and answering some of our questions. We really appreciate it. And it will absolutely inform us as we move forward and bring recommendations forth to council.
And Will knows where to find me. So if you've got questions, he can shoot me an email and I'll get you back what you need, or if you want to talk again at some point in the future, hopefully we can all be face to face and have a conversation together. And to those of you who are seniors, have a great rest of your year. I think we're going to be able to pull off graduations face to face in a location. So that's what we're all working on. And keep doing this work at the next level. As I tell people all the time, we need you guys to do better than we're doing now, because we've screwed this thing up and you can make it better. So keep fighting the good fight and lead with your hearts. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. You as well. So a quick roundtable. Does anybody have any comments or questions or any issues they need to bring up to the subcommittee before we adjourn? All right, hearing none. Our next meeting will be next Monday at 6 p.m. Same digital platform. If you have any issues connecting or have any problems, you can email me or Deidre and we'll help you out. All right, and with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.